Where are these men? How can we create these divisions in a military sense? In an educational sense, it's a recognition that from an academic standpoint, there isn't censure to be had on education. There isn't a taboo subject to broach. There isn't anything you could possibly think of from a theoretical standpoint, and I'm talking the most absolutely perverse concept that isn't grounds for analysis. Everything's on the table. Anything's on the table. If it's conceivable, it's on the table. And there is and should be rigorous investigation from an academic standpoint into the nature of whatever atrocity you like. Right? Me personally, I decided to study evil, and thus a lot of the stuff that I do is rather primal. A lot of the research that it's debased. But that's totally within the limits of what it is that I need to study. There isn't anything conceptually off limits for me to study. There is no taboo study. There is no taboo lecture. Right? If it takes me to the occult, it takes me to the occult. Right? If it takes me to human sacrifice and cannibalism, it takes me to human sacrifice and cannibalism. Not the performance of human sacrifice and cannibalism, but the research into human sacrifice and cannibalism. And it gets way worse than that, right? If it takes me to necrophilia, it takes me to necrophilia. No matter where it takes me, right? So the question is, there is no, the rabbit hole goes, the rabbit hole goes as deep as your creative mind will allow it to go. And every year it gets deeper and deeper and more dark and more horrific. But the idea is, as long as human beings have a propensity to destroy, we have to recognize that that destruction is set in opposition to to the good-natured person who's wholly divorced from this primordial state. That's, for Nietzsche, ridiculous. It's one and the same. You might not be interested in the things that I'm interested in, right? You might not feel comfortable in performing some of the actions that I perform in my daily life, personal life. Right? You might want to condemn me for some of the things if you were to know some of the things that I do. But my thing is, as long as it's not illegal, there's no reason for us to have a conversation on this. Right? Why? Because I, arguably, right, assuming that this Nietzsche stance, I don't ascribe to this bifurcation between good and evil. I recognize that good and evil are two sides to the same coin, to sort of be cliche and clear. And I think the example from Colonel Kurtz represents that perfectly. Page 64. Number 3. Someone is evil if one is unjustified in using power to inflict harm on those things persons deem good. So that we recognize that evil then becomes nothing more for the person who assumes a will to good stance. Nothing more than the unjustified use of power. Justified use of power for those who have a will to good manifests in the destruction of evil. That's the only time you're allowed to use power, right? Is in destroying evil. Any other act manifest of power is evil. If you use power for personal gain, insofar as your mind, your body, your physique, your whatever, that's bad. Right? The only time you can do it is in the destruction of evil. But we saw what those repercussions and the ramifications of that sort of ideological status was. Number 4, thus, the wholly arbitrary and contradictory nature of the relationship between power and good and evil. Right? The wholly arbitrary and contradictory, and I talked about all of that, nature between the relationship of power of good and evil. Power is thus constrained to those who can only manifest it as just, as good. That is, in the destruction of evil. Number 5, the saint then becomes the most powerful type of man, because the saint has divorced himself from all aspects of power and is a conduit, if you will, is a manifestation, right? And we saw earlier that the saints will rule. Oh no, actually, I'm jumping ahead. I'm reading in my eschatology. I probably shouldn't have said that. But in my eschatology series, I'll talk about that. Sort of the idea that in the end, the saints, the resurrected saints rule the world. But that's a different lecture series. But there is justification, all of this sort of interfaces. And then I just want to read and end on this note 361. 361. 361. Okay, so I'm going to end on this note. This is note 361 out of Nietzsche's text, Will to Power. 361. I have declared war on the anemic Christian ideal, together with what is closely related to it. Not with the aim of destroying it, this is important, not with the aim of destroying it. Nietzsche is not out to destroy the Christian ideal. Not with the aim of destroying it, but only of putting an end to its tyranny and clearing the way for new ideals, for more robust ideals. Nietzsche wants to create a space in which this new account, this new descriptor, the will to power, can have social legitimacy. He wants to socially legitimize the notion of will to power. He's not trying to destroy Christianity or the Christian ideal. He's trying to say, listen, I'm creating, and I said this in the beginning of the series, right? This is an attempt to create a discursive space in which atheists, agnostics can have and act morally in the world, totally divorced from any belief of transcendence or knowledge of transcendence, conduct themselves morally, but also embrace the fact that they have this duality within them. And it's not this oppositional polemic, right? Okay. The countenance of the Christian ideal is one of the most desirable things there are, even for the sake of the ideals that want to stand beside it and perhaps above it. They must have opponents, strong opponents, if they are to become strong. Thus, we immoralists require the power of morality. Our drive, our self-preservation wants our opponents to retain their strength. I love that line, right? Thus, we immoralists require, I love that line. I love that line. We immoralists require the power of morality. Our drive, our self-preservation wants our opponents to retain their strength. There's no pride to be had in defeating someone who's already weak, right? Strengthen up. You see this in all the good movies, right? It's like you're not ready to fight me yet, right? You know, I know that you are going to be my greatest antagonist, but I want you to get stronger. Because when we have that duel, I want you to be at your best. So that when I kill you, I can take pride in the fact that I killed you at your best. I mean, that's just, I love this type of stuff, right? So, thus, we immoralists, and for Nietzsche, he's not trying, again, he's not trying to, I went a little off topic, but Nietzsche's not trying to destroy Christianity. He wants to see Christian morality and Christian ideals strong. He wants to see them strong. There's no question about that. He wants them as strong as they are, but he doesn't want them to be tyrannically strong, where they oppress and dominate any antithetical, discursive, ideological space, right? There has to be a space in which I literally create this amazingly beautiful system of a will to power, right? So, thus, we immoralists require the power of morality. Our drive of self-preservation wants our opponents to retain their strength. It only wants to become master over them, right? So I want you to be strong so that you will then see me dominate. Now, Freire would have a problem with that, right? Freire and Nietzsche would not agree on that point. But, you know, for each his own. This is Nietzsche's contribution. So I hope that makes sense. I hope the references to Apocalypse Now, and if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, go rent it. You know, go watch it. Go buy it. Phenomenal movie. And it was the deluxe redo edition, right? That I watched. It was like a 3.5-hour movie. It wasn't like the truncated original edition. So that actually ends this section of my analysis into Nietzsche's Will to Power. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and have a good day.